Alrighty guys, here's your word of the day today. Word of the day today is lousy, which can mean bad or disgusting, as in I'm feeling lousy. It means I'm feeling bad. But in the movie Aladdin, if you watch Genie's scene where he's singing about Prince Ali, one of the lines is, "They're just lousy with loyalty." And that doesn't really make sense if you go with the bad or disgusting definition. They're just bad or disgusting with loyalty. And that's because it links to the second reason, or the second definition, which is to be covered in or teaming with something. So basically, they're just covered in loyalty with Prince Ali, and that makes a little bit more sense. They're covered in loyalty. They're subsumed with their loyalty to Prince Ali. That makes a little bit more sense. The word lousy, by the way, comes from the louse, or in its plural form, lice. So if something was lousy, it meant that it was covered in lice. Which is why usually if you say something's lousy, it's a bad thing. And that could make sense. If they're lousy with loyalty, it might mean that they have too much loyalty, you know? But a lot of times you'll hear, like, Venice used to always complain about it being lousy with tourists, meaning that there were so many tourists walking all over the place. Anyway, another definition for lousy you might not have known. Science fact of the day. How is chocolate made? Chocolate begins its life as this little plant right here. Looks kind of like, I don't know, papaya or something. But when you break it open, it's got all these little seeds in there. And if you look it up, they're gummy and they're kind of like slimy looking. And then they put them in these like bins, cover them with banana leaves and let them ferment for like a while, like several days. Fermentation, by the way, means just basically controlled rotting. So basically the seed has to control rot for about 3 days, a week, something like that. And they just let them sit out in the jungle. I mean, this is not very sterile. Then they bring them in, and they let them dry out in these big bins like this. They constantly have to rake them so that they actually get dried out. And then by the time it gets to the bar, it's had to go through all these steps. So I showed you the harvesting and the fermenting and the drying, but then it has to be packed. Then it's got to be roasted when it gets to the factory, like you roast coffee beans. And then it's got to be processed, and then, and only then, can you begin the chocolate making. So, chocolate is a very complicated process. Also, who figured out that you were supposed to ferment the beans? Because it was around a long time ago. The Aztecs did this, right? So, like, I mean, this has been around for a long time. Somebody just was like, we'll throw these beans in a pot, let them ferment for a while, then we'll dry them, then we'll cook them, and then we'll see what we can make out of it. History fact of the day. The origin of the word Eureka. Eureka means, yay, I found it. That's basically what it means in Greek. But the word origin comes from, well, hello, Carter. The origin of the word Eureka comes from Archimedes, who was tasked with figuring out whether a crown was made of gold. And so, famously, he was taking a bath when he realized that the volume of water he displaced was equal to the volume of himself. And so what he was able to figure out was that if it was silver, it would have to take up more volume, because silver was lighter than gold. It would have to take out more volume to be the same mass. And so he was able to figure out that you could use buoyancy basically to determine whether the crown was actually made of gold. He jumped out of the bath screaming, "Eureka, I've found it. I've discovered it." Eureka means I've discovered it, or I found it. And famously, these little sketches from the Renaissance period, you can tell he's got clothing on, because the legend is that he ran through the streets of Syracuse, which is a city in Sicily. He ran through the streets of Syracuse naked, but the prudish people of the Middle Ages gave him a little bit of a loincloth to run around in. By the way, there's the crown. And then finally, the book of the day is Strangers in the Forest, or Stranger in the Forest by Eric Hansen. A wonderful travelogue. The guy in the 80s basically wanted to walk across Borneo, and he basically just goes to Indonesia, gets a boat to Borneo, hangs out, and eventually walks across the island. It's very, very crazy, because it was still back in the days where there were like only hunter-gatherers living there. So he basically walks around and tries to get from one hunter-gathering place to another. It's a very, very different way of life, but it's also kind of interesting because it brings in the rate of urbanization and the rate of globalization, because like he's in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere, and runs across a pair of like Doc Marten boots. Like I don't remember if that's the exact example, but there's some crazy like things where he's just 2 weeks from anything, and there's a kid running around in Adidas shorts or something. So anyway, it's a very interesting book if you're into travel logs. This one's very much of an adventure story. It's a very, very interesting book. Highly recommend it.